Greetings, my friends, and we are back for another installment of the Singer Trilogy. The book is the second in the trilogy, The Song, and we are beginning with chapter 16 today. If death and life should ever wed, there'd be no dynasty, their house would fall. For death would offer nothing on his rigid firm demand that life must give up all. The night hung close to the sea. It seemed to Anthem that the sky and sea so loved each other that they merged and left no mark. Thus often on the trip, Earthmaker and his singer merged into a single joy. During the long voyage, every man in Anthem sang, while passengers and sailors listened to the great singer's themes. Several in the course of weeks cried out to be unchained. One who sought but would not yield was Praxis, the builder. He labored every day on a great brown roll of parchment on which he drew some clean black lines of stress and excavation. "Tell me, builder, what is it that you draw?" said Anthem. "These are the plans for the great temple, soon to be built in Upper Urbis," Praxis then replied. "Is Urbis short of temples?" asked every man in disbelief. "No, there are temples to all the mountain gods, but none to horses have ever been built." "Is yours to be the temple to the horse?" "Well, yes," said Praxis. "At least the unicorn." Then, formalizing all his doubt, he said with certainty, "It will become the gilded temple of the unicorn. But tell me of your singer, and tell me what it means to be unchained." "You may only be unchained if you renounce your petty dreams and hunger to be free and come to life. Then you will know the joy of melodies that can swirl and echo like a dervish in the soul," said Anthem. "Must I give up the mountain gods to know the singer's music?" "Yes." "But why? Why isn't your singer the friend of all the other gods?" thought Praxis half aloud. He thought a moment and then continued as if he had been overcome by a sudden transformation of some lofty thought or lost ideal. "Better yet, let's give singers temple space in Urbis. I'll save a handsome niche in the temple of the unicorn, where he may stand in state for all the gods and ages to adore." Anthem cringed. "Oh, no, builder. He is not a mountain god, for they are not. The singer is. It's all the more reason that his reality cannot be threatened by their non-reality. Let's bring the singer to the marketplace and raise him in an arch of colonnades. Let's lift him as a warrior king in bronze and decorate him as slayer of the hosts. Can you imagine how temple choirs could sing the ancient star song in great antiphonies? Thousands might call out to be unchained." He seemed about to cease his rhapsodizing. Then, as an afterthought, he added, "He will need a consort now, of course." "A consort?" questioned every man. "Yes, to keep him from too much transcendence. It might destroy him. Recall the myths. The great gods never sleep alone or rule alone. They live in pairs, and in their heavenly sovereignty they need not give up such delights as men can understand. Men will not worship long that which is too unlike them or too far above them." "But that's the meaning of the word, unchained," protested every man. Freedom only comes when men give up their grip on their humanity. Mountain gods are made by men and are too much men to help. They cannot liberate who are not free. The builder took his pen and dipped it in the ink and quickly drew a sketch. It was the singer as he imagined him to look. A naked Titan whose great lyre hung across his back. His heavy locks of hair fell down over his ears and sturdy jaws. His thighs were marble pillars. The drawing was an athlete god who bore a chilling likeness to the youthful Sarkon. He dipped his pen again. This time he drew a lovely woman, supple-breasted and yearning in idealism. Here, said the builder, is the singer and his mate. The simple men of Urbis would worship such a cosmic pair. Why, in their fantasies the two could romp through starry constellations, and their progeny would be the infant galaxies. The ecstasy that they might give the poor of Terra would truly set men free. He stopped again while Anthem shook his head. In flurried words, the builder then erupted one more time. By the gods, dear Anthem, shall we make him ride the unicorn? Think of it! A strident warrior troubadour who reigns among the stars with the great consort, Radia. And when they leave the unicorn to love, the earth will yield great harvests of fertility and joy. No, builder, cried Anthem. Put by your gods and unicorns. The singer is Earthmaker's only son. He needs no temple built by men. Temples are prisons of both gods and men. Stone redeemers neither live nor come again. But, said the builder, let's edit him and set him free. Not slay him, just adapt his small ontology and give him more humanity that we may understand. That's all. Change his solo to acquire and broaden his small song till all the gods of Urbis sing along. Further, the argument with Praxis would be to no avail. That both Anthem and Everyman could see, the voyage soon would end, and it was clear that, at least for now, the singer's friends would not include the builder. The builder scooped his papers from the bridge and walked away. The night drew close. So, therefore, did the day. Shortly after dawn, a sailor yelled the sighting of their destiny. When Anthem raised his head to look, great golden Urbis floated on the sea. Two left the ship to sing in city streets that very morn, but in one mind, the singer sat astride a unicorn. Chapter 17. Thank God the priests are dead and stenographers type memos where machine-gunned clerics bled. We were surprised to hear that the revolutionaries were atheists. It should not have surprised us as it did. We had forgotten that the rabble teemed the lower city and walked in rags and prayed to St. Basil year by year. But the saint was far too busy with the czars to hear. It cost St. Basil everything to be so uppity. The Singerians were not so new to Urbis as Anthem first had thought. Some isolated groups of singers were here and there in Urbis, but always in the lower city. Lower Urbis was a tunneled plain where lived the multitudes of dispossessed. They were the secret of the commerce of the upper city where lived the poet king and all his complex court. Anthem mingled in the tunnel ways of lower Urbis and listened to the superstitions of the laundresses, confectioners, and old bootblacks who labored there. They talked in envy of the world above them, the glistening city in the sun. Some told of leopards near the throne. Some thought the poet king had access to the gilded door that opened on a magic flyway to the mountain of the gods. Most in Lower Urbis did agree that the poet king was mad. Some said he was a cannibal who glutted every night on the flesh of infants kidnapped from the cradles of the lower city. There were other rumors more bizarre, but Anthem listened long enough to know he'd listened long enough. Upper Urbis was a sea of great white buildings that dazzled every visitor. The temples and the senates and the fountains were a sunlit demonstration that those who lived in Upper Urbis were Terra's greatest souls. Fear stalked both cities. Lower Urbis feared Upper Urbis for its wealth and power. Upper Urbis feared the tunnel dwellers for the sheer weight of numbers. Those in Upper Urbis had their dreams of horror, and in those dreams the holes that led down to the lower city swarmed with human insects coming blind and powerful into the light, the vermin of the night who lusted for the wealth above them. Those who roamed the lower labyrinths had long since given up their worship of the mountain gods. The white temples were the altars only for the cultured and the rich. The upper world elite maintained the shrines, for they had bread. The lower city worshipped only bread and had no gods, nor wanted them. Therefore, when the star song came from Eastern immigrants a year before, it met the hapless lives of outcasts in boroughs of the lower city. They long had hungered for a god who could stomach all their sunless miseries, and found such a deity in the singer and his song. Thus every man an anthem sang within the dripping caverns of the underground, and multitudes of Lower Urbis were unchained. Sometimes the knighted class above would hear their songs coming full and free from the passageways beneath. Before a year had passed, the Singarians heard tales that in the east their brothers paid for melodies in blood, and it seemed that only time could forestall the coming storm in Urbis too. When the Singarian festival of life was past and celebrations slept, Anthem saw a sign written in the language of the West and posted near all temples in the upper city. Atheism is a crime, punishable by death. He knew what theologians in the upper city meant by atheism. Atheism was disbelief in the mountain gods. He feared the signs the more because he knew that most of his brothers in the boroughs could not read them. For a while the signs meant nothing. The singer's band stayed clustered in the tunnels where even the police of Upper Urbis feared to go, and the song passed from passageway to passageway while seasons in the upper lands tumbled over one another. More and more of the tunnel dwellers cried to be unchained. Each new Singarian received the stigma in the dim light of Lower Urbis. And when the earth fell from their foreheads and their hands, the words of the rite echoed through the caverns. It is only out of Terra's shame that men of Terra wear the name of Singer, Prince of Planets, Troubadour of Life, Earthmaker, Singer and Invader be the substance of infinity. From day to day they shared the singer's meal and celebrated his death in the machine. The volume of their singing grew until the festival of life had come again. The festival of life was the Singarian holiday that marked the hallowed day Earthmaker breathed into his executed son the breath of life. The troubadour was no longer terror-bound. He had come in pain to break the old and obsolescent definitions of the dead. The word dead was now taboo, and those who were unchained considered it obscene. In the dancing and the singing of the Festival of Life, a guardsman of the Poet King had heard the joy and entered the tunnels in disguise. Whatever his intentions were, he found himself compelled by great intrigue, and the invader drew him into life. He fell upon his knees and cried to be unchained. In the weeks to come, he sang discreetly in the taverns and the halls of Upper Urbis, and several in the very palace of the Poet King became unchained. Their atheism kept discretion, and the star song moved in subtle circles of their confidence. Joy came to the upper city. Those who knew the song worshipped in the labyrinthine, covert ghettos of the lower world. And more they came till the great star song was sung by many in the upper streets. Chapter 18. Unicorns are garish horses, void of browns and grays. We let them live because we fear the humdrum of our days. Look beneath the bloody beams of history and find there is but one alternative to unicorns. The mind may search for more in vain. They are here, said Sarkon to the Poet King of Urbis, and they are singing their strange songs against the mountain gods. Yes, now they sing in the upper and the lower city, and teach their strains of atheism in the shadows of the temples. Their teachings come encased in catchy melodies that leave their converts in a state of joy and crying out to be unchained. Unchained? Asked the king. Unchained from what? From fidelity to the mountain gods. They left the east brief years ago, and now they grow in heavy numbers here in Urbis, too. In the sunless tunnels underneath us now, they multiply like rats in rotting earth. Then Sarkon stopped and placed the marbled flooring before he turned in venom. Not only that, O king, but they insist their music is superior to all the other poetry of terror. Yes, greater than your sonnets on the city or your immortal epic of the gods. They sing in terror's underground that no one but the singer and his father are to be adored, and all the other mountain gods must be despised. And over all this blasphemy they teach. I can barely speak their skepticism, that you are king, are but a man and not a god at all. Sarkon had lost no time in organizing for resistance in the global capital. In the few short months since his arrival, he had brought the artisans and scientists of Urbis to support the traditions of the age. This was his bold attempt to seek the audience and power of Urbis's throne. He knew that his performance must be polished and convincing. The king began to tremble slightly as Sarkon spoke. Finally, he lifted up his head and shook himself and stood. At length, he spoke. Is it true that Praxis, the sculptor and builder, offered the strange singer a sacred niche in the temple of the unicorn, and his followers refused the offer? I, too, have heard it, and I think it must be true, said Sarkon in disgust. I have heard their bold anthem will not let their followers believe in unicorns at all." "Not believe in unicorns?" cried a nearby priest. He traced the sign of Urbis in the air. "Is it true," said Praxis, the builder, entering the conversation. "I offered Oh, it is true," said Praxis, the builder, entering the conversation. "I offered Anthem a temple niche for a statue of their leader." "But why did he refuse?" the king asked in wonder and surprise. "Because," replied the builder, "he believes there are no gods or unicorns, and he does not want the men of Terra to look on the singer as another of the mountain gods when they do not exist." "Enough!" cried the king of Urbis. "The time has come to deal with blasphemous music loose among the temples of the truth. Tomorrow I shall have my knights set poison to the lower city, and we shall station soldiers at every tunnelway. Those who survive will be clapped in irons. We shall start the games of Karnos with the public execution of all who refuse to confess the king of Urbis to be God. Sarkhan, you shall be public prosecutor. You shall set the penalty and nature of the punishment for those who dare to disbelieve." Sarkhan, beaming at the king's response, asked if the king could lead them in the anthem to the mountain gods which the poet king himself had written years before. The court of Urbis joined in the music when the king led them to sing. "And when the wolf came down from the sky and shook off the stars and left them to lie in a pile of sparkling fire to be the isle where Urbis took root in the sea. And dragons came and took the land and hissed their fire, forbidding man to settle in the dragon's lair, the star-corpse isle that claws laid bare. But the peasants prayed primeval morn, then came on the horn of the unicorn that pawed the sea and tore the land and gored the dragons on the sand. And where the blood flowed, there again would grow the souls of 1,000 men. 1,000 gods were also born on the giant horn of the unicorn." While they sang the anthem, Sarkhan, who seemed to be the very incarnation of the gods, walked out of the hall, pleased at his new position in the service of the poet king. Praxis shortly followed and soon caught up to him in the street. "I'm almost finished with my statue of the unicorn," the builder said. "As yet, the figure on his back is still in uncut stone. I had offered it to the singer, but he will have nothing now to do with the mountain gods. I wonder, Sarkhan, if you might consent to be my model for the rider of the unicorn. Be mindful that it will be years before his temple is complete, and when it is, you will be there, timeless, in the stone." Sarkhan agreed to be the model. Praxis' chisel would leave him for the generations yet unborn to see. Sarkhan loved his great deception. The singer's followers would die for believing far too much, and those who called them atheists would die believing nothing much at all. But he would play the temple game with rare delight. All who refused to kiss the unicorn would die. The very thought of every man in Anthem bowing at his marble horse and crying out repentance for their atheism filled him with anticipation. He could barely wait for morning when lower Urbis would be poisoned. The lucky would die swiftly in the vaulted, fuming caverns. The rest would live to be the sport of those who loved the temples and the bloody games of Karnos. Do you believe in mountain gods? Sarkon asked Builder. Of course not, answered Praxis. Nor I, responded Sarkon. Isn't this a glorious destiny? The labels are so cleverly applied and misapplied. All living is called death, and truth is called a lie by liars. Nothingness affirms itself, and substance is denied. Before long, they entered the sculptor's studio. A great unfinished statue stood before them. How long will this take, Builder? Sarkon questioned as he undressed to sit upon a modeled framework of a gallant steed. His brutal nakedness led Builder to applaud and trace the sign of Urbis in the air. 6 months I need to finish, said the Builder, pointing to the statue. And will you promise me your soul, were I to give it to you in the morning, quite complete? Impossible, the Builder cried. But if you think it can be done, well, yes, I'll give you anything you ask. Very well. Leave me, and you will see me clearly in the clot of stone, come morning. The Builder left, and Sarkon gloated once again that he was soon to claim the souls of men who trusted both the mountain gods and the singer. But best of all, he owned the soul of an artist who believed in neither and therefore was most vulnerable of all. When the sculptor came early to his studio the next day, he was stunned by the finished statue. In flawless polished marble, his young friend Sarkon, godlike and gallant, sat astride the giant unicorn. Across his back hung the lyre of the singer, a divine riddle in marble. Was he the singer or the anti-singer? Had he the power of Earthmaker or the mountain gods, or neither? The unicorn would bring life to all those who kissed it in the wisdom of denial. The unicorn gave life, therefore, to traitors. The rest would die, and the dying would come hard, for giant Tasman jackals snarled in the pits where they were kept. Chapter 19. Herbicide may be as quick as a coronary, or as painful as the cancer ward. Some cities die very fast. Hiroshima, Pompeii, Sodom. Some cities die very slow. Masada, Sparta, Dresden. Ask Leningrad, which took 900 days to die. Who was more blessed? They envied Nagasaki for her fireball from the west. Herbicide became the fashion of the day. Killing Lower Urbis was accomplished by a dozen knights who entered the tunnels of the underground near noon. A torch was set on oil-soaked leaves of poisonous root moss, and the smoldering fumes swirled and eddied through the labyrinth. The caverns became death chambers, where old Singarians died in rags and children breathed their final breath. Mothers clasped infants and fell across them to shield them from the evil haze. There was no place or time to sing the one great melody for which they lived and died. Only those within a few steps of outside air survived, and as they staggered to the fresh, clean air of day, each was clamped in chains and taken to the prison yards to await their sentencing. Every man and anthem were spared the poisonous caverns of the underground. They had gone early in the day to sing in the construction camps, where tradesmen labored with the quarried stones to move them into columns of the city's latest temple. From every tunnel exit, they heard the wailing of arrests. Lower Urbis died by nightfall. Every man in Anthem searched for some place to wait the coming storm. They found a small, forgotten park grown up in weeds that sheltered an old grotto in decay. They prayed in silence for their brothers in the tunnels. The day was marked by such arrests as Urbis had never seen before. Singarians by hundreds were herded into cells so gorged that there was no room to lie or sit. When morning came, construction crews arrived at every opening to the lower city. The poisoned air was sealed in by masons who built walls at every entrance. A broken-hearted Anthem wept. None who lived were sure who the survivors were. Nightly, as the sun went down, grief-laden voices rose from 100 cells, and the star song floated on the air. In the beginning was the song of love, alone in empty nothingness in space. It sang itself through vaulted halls above, reached gently out to touch the Father's face. Upper Urbis battened down their windows to keep the music out, but still it filtered through the lattices so that the free men of the city wondered who was really free. Only those unchained could know. The music of a free man taunts a slave, and the free were found only in prison cells and tunneled tombs below. The rest of Urbis prayed for freedom to the unicorn of life and tried to sleep. But sleep, like freedom, came only to the prisoners. In the weeks that passed before the games of Karnos, hope began to circulate among the prison cells. The singer will return and smash the structures of the state. The poet king and public prosecutor will be swallowed by the canyon of the damned. Thus spoke the hope. On the 18th day of the imprisonment, a baby died in a cell. In cell 15. The mother tried concealing it, but finally slipped it through the rusted iron gate of her cell door. She saw her baby moved along before the shovels, which pushed the human residue into the drayage carts. The mother cried to the Singarians in her cell, who were again reminded of the coming singer and his promises of victory. On the 22nd day of the imprisonment, a woman became sick in Cube 18. Her fever sparked attempts at quarantines. Within a week, most of the cell was sick. The guards themselves contracted the contagion, and the fever spread throughout the camp. The death toll was most severe among the very young. The victims of disease were burned, and so by day the prisoners could see the smoke columns rise where bodies burned outside the prison yards. 7 days before the games of Karnos, every man sent a small scroll wrapped in a sheath of wax. He gave it to the sentry with a bribe. The guard slipped the scroll into a pail of swill and passed it through the gate in cell 16. A convert, finding it, stripped all the wax away. The scroll was dry. Its title, The Finale. Its subject, Hope. Death cannot be to those who know the troubadour of life. He gives a crown to every man who shows by dying that the singer lives. So give the breath you cannot keep to gain the life you cannot lose. Before the axemen never weep, but sing with joy the singer's truths. The prince of dragons soon must fall before the prince of planets. The scroll told futuristic tales the prisoners could never fully understand. Its saga brimmed with beasts and armies and cities under siege. Most of them rejoiced at paragraphs they understood. Urbis, tyrant of Terra, was mentioned by her ugly name. She would be destroyed for all her sins, and the poet king and the prosecutor would be sentenced at the throne of Earthmaker. The scroll was passed from fevered hand to fevered hand, and the Singerians sang a new hymn, one that spoke of hope. Most felt the singer would return before the dreadful games began, and so they sang, "He comes in power. Rejoice, the hour of Jubilee is near. Lift up the cry before we die. Our singer will appear." Sarkhan made the builder his chief aide to organize mass execution of all Singerians. 3 days before the long-awaited games were scheduled to begin, the public prosecutor announced a special mandate to the wardens of the prisons. All children in the cells below the age of 7 summers must be taken from their parents. This would test their victory and joy. They lifted up their voices and begged the singer to come. I'm checking to see how many more chapters we have. I think I'm going to stop here today. Just before the games of Karnos. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his peace.